Evening. Hey, before we do anything else, can we say a big hometown welcome to Casey Parks?
I like that you said hometown.
Well, hometown because we'll probably talk about that some. What does it mean?
We will, yeah.
What does it mean for a place to feel like a hometown or not? As the lights come on, I want to say a big welcome to all of you. My name's Adam Davis. I'm with Oregon Humanities. That's very nice and totally
some huge
unnecessary.
Adam Davis fans in this room tonight.
There's a lot, yeah. This is the first event in our 2023-24 Consider This series on the theme Fear and Belonging. I'll tell you more about other events later, but we're delighted to be kicking it off, thinking about things like gender, family, belonging, faith, other questions like that, talking with Casey, both about your journalism and your incredible book, Diary of a Misfit. Before we jump in, I want to do just a couple things. First, I want to let you know the layout, which is we're going to talk for a little bit, a little under an hour. Then we will invite questions from you over here. And then Casey will sign books up front there, and we hope you will talk to each other, and we hope you'll also talk to people you didn't know when you came in. We'll encourage you to do that again at the end. And I should say that in addition to the people here, there's a viewing party in LeGrand, so hello to the folks in LeGrand. And there are also people just watching online, presumably while making dinner or something like that. I want to say a couple thanks, then I want to ask them some questions to help you get a sense of the room, and then we're going to jump in.
Okay.
That's all right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on Coming Out Day. For those of you who didn't get a look at the flyer or me right now, I am gay. So I'm just coming out to y'all, because actually you have to come out over and over again, it turns out. So
I'm looking forward to this night for myself as well now. Who knows what the night holds?
The night is long. It's a long night. So
the night is young. That's great. I want to say a big thank you to the National Endowment for the Humanities. They have an initiative this year called the United We Stand Initiative, and they're working to try to get people thinking about where hate is showing up. And one of the things we're doing with that support is this series on fear and belonging. I also want to thank the Oregon Cultural Trust, the Susan Hammer Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation, and the City of Portland's We Are Better Together program. And I want to thank so many of you and you around the state who do a lot to support not only Oregon Humanities programs, but lots of community work around the state. So just a big thanks to all of you for that. So thank you. The questions I wanted to ask. First, if this is your first Oregon Humanities Consider This program, could you make some noise or signal that it's your first one? Thank you for coming. If you're a returner of some kind, could you make a little noise? Okay, this is a more complicated question. Take a moment to think of an instance over the last few weeks when you felt a strong sense of belonging to a group or a place. Just take a second. Time when you felt a strong sense of belonging. All right, if that was easy to think of, could you make a little noise? Okay. Last question for now is, I'm going to ask you to think again for a second. If you can think of a significant instance where some aspect of your identity seemed to make it harder for you to feel a sense of belonging. Some aspect of your identity seemed to make it harder for you to feel a sense of belonging. Could you make a little noise? So that's sort of what we know about the room.
they don't fit in. Hopefully we can do some matchmaking tonight.
You think so?
Well, it seems like people need a friend out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because I wasn't going to go. I'm not going to go towards matchmaking right away. I want to ask you. Not
That's
right
in
away.
the Q&A.
Well, that's in the Q&A for sure. I I think we're going to talk a lot about gender, identity, and belonging, but I wanted to start actually by asking you about church. In part because in Diary of a Misfit, about a third of the way through, when you're talking about Roy, who's sort of, in a way, one of the centers of the book, you say, I don't know if Roy ever felt the way I did at church. He had to live his entire life knowing he was an outsider, but I got to spend my teenage years convincing myself I belonged.
I do not remember writing that. I wrote this book during the pandemic, so a lot of it is just blurred out. Sometimes I read something out in public, and I'm like, did I write this?
I can show you where I dog-eared the page.
But I did feel like I belonged at church at one point in my life, so I believe that this is true. This is from my book.
And I wanted to ask you, what do you mean when you say you felt like you belonged at church? Like, what was going on, and why did you feel like you belonged?
Oh, gosh. It's so hard to describe what belonging feels like before you've experienced not belonging. Does that make sense? Like, I had this until I was probably 18. I never experienced the feeling of not belonging somewhere. Like, I just had my own milieu, and that was mine. And so, like, I knew where I was going to go every Sunday and Wednesday, and I knew who was going to be there, and I knew what they thought of me, for better or for worse, because church people do love to gossip. And so I just felt like my place was there. Like, I never thought, like, oh, I'm not supposed to sit on the third pew 2 rows behind the pastor and his wife. I'm not supposed to be here on Wednesday nights, like, talking to this youth pastor, until I got kicked out.
And that's when the thought of belonging showed up? It took getting kicked out to have a sense of what the positive feeling of belonging was?
I don't know if I even knew it immediately that I didn't belong. I just knew that I was kicked out, and then it was, or I knew I was going to lose it. So essentially, for those of you who haven't read the book, when I was a freshman in college, I kissed a girl, and it was way better than kissing a boy. Sorry, Adam, but like that beard, does not do it for me. I would not enjoy that. I think some women might like it, but not me. Anyway, and it was such a powerful, amazing feeling. Like about a week later, I went home to go to church for Easter Sunday, and they were playing one of those Christian songs that immediately makes you start crying. And the feeling was so powerful, both of the chord progression and this girl's strawberry lip gloss, that I had to tell my mother, and it did not go well. And the pastor of our church prayed a really nifty little prayer, which is save her and take her. And the idea is, like, I would ask forgiveness for the strawberry lip gloss thing and then die immediately so I could go to heaven. And then I knew I could never go back. And initially, I just kind of, like, walled up my heart about that. Like, I had spent the year before basically scared that I would go to hell, or scared that, like, some angels would come to me as they did Sodom and Gomorrah and turn me to salt or something. And when I actually got kicked out, I just kind of, like, walled up my heart and was like, well, I don't care about that anyway. And I found, like, a different kind of belonging. There were maybe 4 gay people in all of Mississippi, and we had a club that we called the Quilting Club, but even though none of us could sew. One of the guys must have picked that, because that sounds like a gay man thing. I don't think I would have come up with that. I would have wanted us to be the Angelina Jolie Club. Very subtle. And it wasn't really actually till I was writing the book that I understood just how clearly I didn't belong in that church. So we're talking like 20 years later, which, again, I was writing this book during the pandemic, so churches were putting their broadcasts online. And my church is in Louisiana, so they were actually meeting in person maskless, where 2 or more are gathered. their corona is in the midst, probably. But they were also broadcasting them online, and I looked it up, and I saw that everyone that I spent every Sunday and Wednesday night of my childhood with was still there. And that was the first time that I realized, like, oh, I'm the only one who's not there, and I'm not allowed to be. And I think then I went into, like, a really deep and delayed mourning for that.
I mean, while you were talking, we were laughing, and you said it in funny ways, but it sounds actually quite hard, quite intense, and it's interesting what you said about the kind of delayed realization, and it makes me want to ask about Roy and your interest in Roy as a subject, because it kind of seemed like Roy also, from the beginning, you seemed maybe or maybe not to understand that Roy was outside also. What interested you about Roy?
Yeah, so again, for those of y'all who don't know, after the strawberry lip gloss, please go to heaven thing, my grandma pulled me aside on the 4th of July and told me that she grew up across the street from a woman who lived as a man. This is like 2002, so the terminology was very different, and my grandma was in her 70s, so forgive her for not getting it exactly right. But she told me that this guy was a country singer who mowed everybody's lawns in town, and he would pick a banjo on the porch. And again, like at that time, I knew about 4 gay people across the entire South, and I don't even know if, I think one of them was bi, so I don't know if I even fully counted them at that time. And my grandma didn't say Roy was gay, but I just had this sense of like, oh, somebody else exists like me. And he was older, so it gave me this like historical context for myself, because at that point I didn't know any kind of history about gay people. Like there was one kind of fey music teacher when I was in 4th grade, and that was really the only like adult I had seen be gay. And the way my grandmother talked about Roy, not the music teacher, I don't know if she knew him, but was with like real love and admiration. And actually, when she first told me about him, I said, well, what did people say about this person? Like, did they tar and feather him in the center of town? She lived in like a really small town, so I thought maybe they did that there. And she was like, no, everybody loved Roy. And I think that just gave me so much hope, because at the time, like, my mother really seemed to hate me, and my pastor seemed to hate me, and everyone that I had built my life around was just suddenly gone. And so I just kind of became obsessed with this idea that if I could get to the town where my grandma grew up, which was just like 45 minutes from the town where I grew up, like if I could get to that paradise, like there would be a place where people would love and accept me. But I didn't have a car or anything, so I couldn't. It took me a long time to get there. I came to Portland instead.
Yeah. Which actually is both in the book and in Portland interesting to think I came to Portland instead.
I actually didn't have a car when I got here either, and I lied to my first boss and said I did so I could get the job.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like you found more than jobs out here. It seems like actually you found some of the kind of community that you weren't finding home, at least originally, and maybe some legislation that proved to be friendlier to the way you wanted to live. But it also seems like you left some things that felt more like yours. You're furrowing your brow in a way that interests me.
Well, I don't think there was positive legislation in Oregon then. Oregon actually in 2004 also voted against same-sex marriage, I believe. So we ain't perfect here either.
Yeah.
But so I don't think there might have been an equal protection clause. But I did, yes, find more than 4 gay people.
I mean, you write, and so in a way, that's what I'm starting to push towards, is the question of like different kinds of belonging. And and I say that in part because it shows up in some of the Washington Post stories over the last couple of years too. I think it's Sid, the story about Sid High, who maybe will have to leave the state in order to get medication.
That's the kid in Mississippi.
The kid in Mississippi.
Ray, yeah.
And even says, like, if I leave the state, I'll be able to get sort of more of what I need. And the kid's mother feels like, yeah, but you're leaving some of who you are, and the kid seems to feel that way too. So I kind of just wanted to ask a little bit about that, about competing calls on where one ought to be.
Yeah, so when I moved to Portland, I was 22, maybe 23, and it took a long time for me to miss the South or to feel that pain of losing it. Like initially, I was really just excited to see that there were vegetarian restaurants, which is part of being a young lesbian. You have to go through that phase. It's the Angelina Jolie and the vegetarianism are like two must-dos on the lesbian menu.
Check. Yeah.
You might come out as a lesbian by the end of the night. I actually just went camping with some friends this weekend, and we were talking about this band that used to exist, Swan Island. And my friend was telling me, she's like, didn't you just think they were so cool because they were older? And I was like, they're my same age. I didn't think they were older. And I was like, but I did think it was cool that there were 4 to 5 queer people in one band. Like, that was all of the whole of Mississippi to me at that time. And, like, I think I was just so shocked to see that there were dating possibilities. Like when in Mississippi, just like if someone was gay anywhere in the state, I was going to kiss them. Like whether I was attracted to them or not, like we were gonna hook up. Like, and so to see like I could maybe like actually see who I was attracted to or like who I wanted to be friends with for some reason other than us just both being gay. But there was lots of stuff, like every movie I wanted to see came here, every band I wanted to see played here, I really loved going to readings, and every author would come. So those first few years were just kind of a high, and then it took a while for me to start realizing, like, what I had lost or what I missed. Like, you ever smile at somebody walking down the street here? It's not really welcomed. It's kind of, or if you were to get in an elevator and start talking to someone, it's kind of a weird thing to do here, and I miss that about the South, just like the shared humanity. Like, probably a lot of the people in the South would hate me if they knew anything about me, but they are gonna wave at me if we pass on the street, and I like that kind of thing, and I think it's just become more and more complicated for me as I've gotten older, but this kid in Mississippi that you're referencing, I did this story for the Washington Post recently where 1 in 3 transgender children now live in a place that bans them from getting the health care that they need. And Mississippi is one of 2 states that's gone a little bit farther, which is that they also ban you from going to another state to get the care. Like, they don't want you to just be miserable in Mississippi, like, you also can't leave. But so I followed this mom as she takes her son on basically an illegal road trip to go get testosterone somewhere else. And by the end of the story, the mom realizes she cannot make this trip every single month. And testosterone is a controlled substance, so you can't really stock up on it. So she sends him to live with his dad in Virginia. And the kid was sad, like he was sad to leave his mother. He's a teenage boy who didn't know he was going to lose his mom and suddenly is, but I don't think he was sad about Mississippi yet. Like, he's excited to go see other things, and it's interesting to see him as an adult, or for me being the adult, and to know that he doesn't know yet, like, what he's lost or like how the ways it'll come back to him.
In part because it took you a bit to feel the sense of what you lost, or?
Yeah.
So can I ask about these stories? Stories with maybe especially young people, young transgender people trying to get the health care they need. I want to ask a little bit, in part because of what happens in Diary of a Misfit, where it feels like exploring Roy's story is a way of exploring your story. And I want to ask about like how much of your identity, your sense of yourself, matters to the stories that you're trying to tell as a journalist?
I think you'll get a much different answer for me now than you would have when I was reporting the book. So one of the first reporting trips I ever took to write my book, I took my mother with me, which is very unorthodox. That's not a thing. I don't know why I did it. Well, I guess I do, and you could read 350 pages to figure out why. But we ran into a gay guy in this town, and he took us to the cemetery, and my mom was telling him, she was like, you know, we're just doing this story as a journey of self-discovery for my daughter because she's gay. And I just looked at her and I was like, don't tell people I'm gay. That's not why I'm doing this. And I was adamant for a long time. I think there are some people in here who knew me then where I would always be like, this is not a personal project to me. I have no vested interest in this. It's just an interesting story. And people who would beg me to put myself in it, and I would be like, no, I'm a journalist. I have no feelings or emotions. Or if I put my own self in this, I'll never work as a journalist again. And it was a long, long, long road for me to be willing to reckon with that as to why I saw myself in that. And it's still a tricky feeling for me now with my job, because I do still have that feeling of like, I'm a journalist. I don't have feelings or emotions or a take on any of this. But then, like a couple months ago, I went to Ohio for a legislative session about another one of these bills where they were banning kids from getting hormones. And they passed the bill, and all of the moms in the Capitol just went ape and like started running after politicians, screaming and cussing at them, and the kids were all crying. And somebody like clocked me as an adult and handed me one of the children. I was like, I'm not an adult, but, and the kid was just sobbing and, you know, was trying to tell me, like, this is the only place I've ever lived. I don't understand why they hate me. And I couldn't help but think of my own teenage self after Mississippi banned same-sex marriage. It was 87%. And I remember going to get an icy at the convenience store and just looking around the convenience store and thinking, 9 out of 10 people hate me in here. And I would drive down the road and just be like, that person hates me. This person hates me. And that has shaped the way I do everything in my life. Even now, even here in Gay Xanadu, like I still just have an innate impulse feeling that everybody hates me. Even, I think I was telling you in the back before he came out, I'm like, everyone's gonna hate me. And just watching it in real time, like watching this kid get branded, I guess, and knowing like this thing that they feel right now, they're gonna feel for the rest of their life. Yeah, I mean, I haven't written that story yet, but when I do, like, how am I not bringing myself to that? I'm not gonna write in like this in the Washington Post, P.S. this also happened to me, but like the way that I write it will be informed by my own life experiences. The fact that I was there anyway is probably already informed by my life experiences.
And can I ask, even before the writing, the interaction with the young people that you end up reporting on? What about that part of it?
Yeah, I think that they think I'm cool. I don't know if any of them are watching and you don't think I'm cool. Please let me know. I will correct the record. But it's interesting. The last couple of stories I've done, everyone has already read my book before I got there, and usually the kids have listened to the book, and so they've just spent 15 hours, or some of them listen to it on like 1.9 speed, but so then they're surprised that I talk in this cadence. But they already know a lot about me, and I think for a lot of them, it is really cool to, not because I'm me, but just because like I'm from this place, or I had a similar upbringing to them, and I've like made it somewhere. I did one reading in Oxford, Mississippi, and there was like 100 teenagers signed up to meet me, and they were all like shaking, and some of them would like keep going back farther and farther in the line because they would like lose their nerve to come meet me. And I was like, oh my God, I am not that fun to meet. Like, I'm not worth shaking over. But then I was thinking, I was like, okay, if I were 18 in here in Mississippi and I showed up, like, I would be obsessed with me. Like, I'd be like, you made it out and came back and you have a cool job. So I was like, okay, you're like denying them that opportunity if you're just like, oh, it's not fun to meet me. So I try to think of that sometimes, as just be like, to imagine what I would have felt like then.
You said you made it out?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is how I think of it and how I think they think of it.
Can I just ask, like, the follow-up question, made it out of what?
So much. I mean, I guess the den of low expectations. It's not just the place. It's like what you think you'll be there, what your earning potential is, what your ability to see the movie that you want to see is, your dating possibilities. Just to even get to see any other part of the world at all. Like, I don't know. I had this experience on Lake Washington a couple years ago in Seattle, and I was like watching the sunrise, and I just had this very clear feeling of no one in my family ever saw this, and they didn't get to travel, or they didn't ever leave like our 13,000 person town, and just like how different my life is that I can go experience those things.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking two things while you're talking. One is I'm thinking about, like, given this idea of belonging, it's interesting to think that making it out means leaving the people and place that you're from. That's just interesting and feels really loaded, that one sign of making it out is going to a place that's new and to people that are new. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is Roy. And, like, are there any ways, as you got to know Roy, where you feel like Roy made it out, or Roy got somewhere that maybe not Lake Washington, but figuratively some kind of Lake Washington? And you take either one of those.
I kind of forget the first one, but I think...
It's probably forgettable.
But it did remind me, I just got some videotapes digitized, and there are videos of me as a kid, and my accent in the videos is so thick that I can't understand myself. And it is kind of funny, but it also felt so sad to me, of like, wow, I can't even... I'm so far from where I was, I can't even understand what I'm saying or what anyone in there is saying. Like, what happened to me? Obviously, I still have like a little bit of an accent, but but it was really thick back then. And I think it just felt like a metaphor for something bigger, of the ways I can't go back there. And like, yeah, I just miss that lingua franca, I guess, like knowing how to talk like that. Did Roy ever leave? So this actually, for some reason, was something that really obsessed me and I was working on this as a movie for a long time, and a friend of mine, R.B. Bernier-Clark, went on all the trips with me and videoed, and for some reason, for so long, we were obsessed with the idea of finding out, did he ever leave Delhi? And everyone kept saying, oh no, he didn't have a driver's license, he didn't have a car. And probably like 8 years into it, someone gave us a picture of him standing in front of a car. And we were like, oh, he had a car, like he made it somewhere. And then the very last night that we were working on this, his neighbor said that he heard he went to Nashville one time. And for some reason, like, that just made me feel so happy and hopeful. Like, I hope he got to go see something else. Not even to live, but just to see. Like, he really wanted to go to the Grand Ole Opry, and I hope that he got to go there.
It's a lot to think that a sign of good things happening is leaving where you're from, leaving the people you're from.
mean, for a lot of people, it's not. Like, a lot of people are very happy to stay where they're from, and I wish I could have been that kind of person who could do that.
Mm-hmm. Though you did, and maybe you still do, for the project, geez, you went back deep. Like, you kept going back and you kept peeling back more layers of the place and the people you were from. What was animating that?
Oh, but I wish I could live there and feel at peace about it. Mm-hmm. Like, when I do go to the South, so even just to do this Mississippi story, the one where they're going to get testosterone, like, as soon as I get there, I just feel like so right. Like, the air is right to me. Like, I got to get my catfish in. It's just, even though I can't understand my baby accent, like, I know how it works. And I'm kind of like strutting around the streets like, this is my place. And over the course of just a couple of days, it begins to dawn on me all the ways that it's not my place, or the ways that I just don't want to spend my life every day thinking I look too gay and something's going to happen to me because of that. It's just a very painful feeling to just to live your life being like, everybody hates me. And though that is a part of my fabric here, it's just very present when I'm there, where I'm constantly thinking, like, is something going to happen to me at the grocery store? Is someone going to say something to me at the gas station? Is someone going to legislate in a way? Like, one of the scenes in this book, my mom and I were in Mississippi, because, again, I had taken my mother on a reporting trip, and it was the day Mississippi passed this law that said anybody can refuse to serve you if you're gay or trans. So that could be a doctor, a lawyer, a therapist. You can get kicked out of any restaurant for being gay. And that law is technically still on the books. It got appealed, but then never went anywhere. I don't know that it's being, like, used, but it could be. Like, I mean, it's become a much more tense time over the last year as different groups have funneled a lot of money into making it a more intense time. Mm-hmm. And it's just a really hard way to live. And then also, none of those places recycle, and it just always makes me feel really weird to be just like, although I don't know what's happening with our recycling, because it seems like it's actually just a show, but I like the show.
It's a good show.
I like feeling moral as I put my stuff in the box to nowhere, but...
I mean, I'm from Chicago. We would put recycling in a blue bag. We'd put the blue bag in the same trash can. Yeah, and we felt good. We slept all right.
You have that moment of sanctimony just in your home, and what happens outside of your home that's not my problem. Like, I have done my part here.
So can I ask you about a place that feels like, it seems like in some ways Portland feels like a more comfortable place? How to describe a place that's better to be?
Well, they're very different feelings. Like, I don't have that air feeling when I get back to Portland. Although I do remember my very first impression of Portland was that the air was so light. Like, I just kept trying to tell people back home, like, you can't hold it. Like, it's not heavy. It's just clean and pure. Like, I was obsessed with the air when I first got here. I did not know that it existed like this. And I guess I'm immune to that now because I never think about it. But, so I don't have that feeling. I don't love when the rain comes like some of y'all do. I don't feel like my time has arrived. But I do like seeing the trees when I fly in. I fly a lot for work. So I do have that feeling when I'm looking over and I'm like, this place. And I have my people. Like, most of the friends that I have here are friends I've had for 15 years, and they're people who know me. Like, I had a really bad day today, and I texted one of my best friends, and I was like, I need you to come just be my person in here with me for a minute. And she did, and I know she would do that for me for anything. Like, if I had like I don't know, bowel issues one time, and she showed up at my house immediately with like magnesium milk, and I have the people that I can say like, I cannot go to the bathroom. Can you please come over?
That's important.
That's my belonging. Yes, milk of magnesia. I think that's
feel
what it
like
was.
you
It's
just-
disgusting, whatever it is, but
No.
it does work if you are in need.
I feel like you just offered all of us a very specific and vivid definition.
That is courtesy of Beth Nakamura, local hero. So thank you.
Thank you. I was going to ask you, what does it mean to say, I have my people here? Because I feel like that's another way of talking about belonging. You did just offer an evocative example of what it means to have your people, but can I ask, like, do you have a clear understanding? How would you describe what it means? Who are your people? How do you know they're your people?
Well, I guess they are still there even when I mess up, or even when I get divorced from them, or I did, but before coming over here, text my ex-spouse and ask if I could wear these socks. And they told me I had them on the wrong feet. And so I switched them. And yeah, that's how I know. Or I have another friend that we have both disappointed each other very deeply many times. And like they keep showing up for me. Mm-hmm. And if you are my friend and you've seen me hungry, you know it's horrible. So people who stick with me through that, or people who don't care what job I do, I think that's, for much of my life, I've found like all of my value from my job, and my job didn't always sound impressive. I did cover Cornelius and Aloha for a long time. And there are people, my ex-spouse, for instance, who knew me when I was just covering like the new Walmart come into town in Cornelius. And I know that they would love me if I lose the job I have now. If I started mowing lawns, like it doesn't matter to them. Like they love me for the person I am.
And can I push back to the quilting club example? And I don't remember if club is the right word, but in a way, I think I want to ask a question about belonging and similarity. Like, how much is your sense that to feel a sense of belonging, we have to share core parts of our identity?
I guess I've never thought about it. I think that probably is true for me with my closest people, though what that thing is different. Sometimes it's being gay. Sometimes for me and Beth, for instance, it's just a way of seeing the world. Like, Beth works at the Oregonian, and we've done a ton of stories together, and I know we're always going to think the same devastating detail is the most important thing in the world. And, like, I know we're going to hate all the same people and love all the same people. So that's a similarity, but we're not bonding over our sexuality, or, and we're not even she's from Massachusetts. We're not from the same place, but there is just like a way of coming up in the world that it's easier. It's easier for me to be close to people who I think came up working class, or have that divide within themselves of being from somewhere else. And I don't know. I mean, there's lots of ways of connecting to people.
Yeah, but I'm thinking back to, well, stories you've written, and I think these young people especially feeling really disconnected from people, really isolated from people and from their place. And so in a way, what those stories raise for me is the question, what are the conditions for the other side of that? What are the conditions that make it more likely that we feel connected, that we feel like we do belong?
To people who are different than you?
In some cases, to people who are different, or maybe the argument is actually important similarity is a key to belonging. I hadn't gotten to the answer. I've just been thinking about the question of like, what does it take to feel deep down, I belong?
I imagine there's just some measure of vulnerability on everyone's part, which is always a huge, scary risk. There are people in my family or people I've written about who have completely different political views than I do, although I, of course, have none, who I do feel like deep bonds to, even though we're really different, because I think we have been vulnerable with each other or are just willing to hear each other and see each other as specific humans rather than like stand-ins for the entire Republican Party or stand-ins for all the flaming liberals in Portland burning everything down to the ground.
Right.
Or
Yeah. I think, I don't know if you heard this, but when the 3 questions at the beginning about, especially the latter 2, like there was a good deal of noise around people feeling like they were able to think of an example when they felt a sense of belonging, and there was also a lot of response to the question, is there some aspect of your identity that might make it tougher to feel that sense of belonging?
You know, when I was reporting this book, probably the most shocking thing to me is that everyone felt like they didn't belong. So the title of the book actually comes from Roy's journals. He would write on the front of them, Diary of a Misfit. And almost everyone once we started telling people that's what we wanted to call it, people would be like, well, I was always a misfit because I had the wrong barrettes, or my mom told me that she was a misfit because she had a job mixing 35 cans of tuna fish every morning before school, so she had to go to school smelling like tuna fish, and nobody would want to invite her to their parties, because she smelled like tuna fish. Or my grandma felt like she didn't belong in this town because she was a sharecropper who moved to this town when cotton picking mechanized in the early 1950s, and she had never seen a banana. And there's just all kinds of ways of like feeling like you don't fit in, and I imagine that most of us are just walking around thinking, as I do, everyone hates me, and you know, I don't have anyone. Like I do have a friend where I'm often in kind of a pity party of thinking I don't have anyone, and this one friend of mine will just start listing how many friends I do have, and I'm like, well, they don't count. I'm talking about new friends. Or
But I mean, it would be striking if like similarity is a core part of belonging, some kind of similarity, and it turns out one of the things we share is a sense that we don't belong, like that it's a ubiquitous thing.
yeah, I think it could be really hard to say that to each other, or to get at the root of that, I guess, of understanding that I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I'm in between therapists, so.
Can I throw my hat in the...
I'm starting therapy tomorrow, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry you picked the wrong week to have me on.
No.
Is someone upset that I'm starting therapy? It is scary, and I don't know if it'll work out either. That's the thing about therapy. You need like a therapist to get you through the process of looking for. It's so horrible.
I want to go to Roy from therapy and Roy's journals.
I don't think Roy had I don't think there is a therapist in Delhi. I'm pretty sure they don't believe in that.
Why was Roy writing?
One can never know, but are we giving away the end of the book?
You get to decide. But
okay,
I mean,
well,
in a way,
with apologies to anyone who wants to read and not know anything, I guess just close your ears really quickly or run out real fast. After many, so the very first trip, someone told me that Roy, the guy who grew up across the street from my grandma, that he kept a journal every day, and that his neighbors had taken them all and still had them. So I wrote this really obsequious letter to the neighbors and was like, we want to make a tribute to Roy. And they wrote me back. I wrote this long letter, and they wrote me back on a big, long, yellow legal sheet of paper, and it just said, "Leave this story alone." And for the next 9, 10 years, I kept going back and asking to see them. And then finally, in 2019, the neighbor changed his mind and let me see them. And all of the diaries start off with, "Hi, I'm Roy. They're very sad. They're like, I'm stupid, ugly, fat, but here's a picture of me." And I also keep a journal every day, and I never introduce myself in the journal because I'm hoping none of y'all will ever read it. And I don't put pictures of myself or write like, "Here's me." Like, they definitely seemed like geared toward an audience to me, which was a relief to me because I, for a long time, didn't know if doing this project was like the right moral thing to do, because usually when I do an article, I have the person's permission and they have consented. And I usually actually try to talk people out of doing an article. Like, I have a spiel where I'm like, "This is going to require so much free labor from you. It's going to be horrible. You think you're going to look awesome. It's actually going to be you as a whole person. So there's going to be some bad stuff." And people still want to do it. I don't know why, but I didn't get to give that spiel to Roy, although I was going to say he didn't have to do any free labor, but I guess he did keep the journals for 40 years.
For 40 years, writing every day.
Yeah.
And just to say again, you said you're not sure if there were...
Well, I'm not sure if he would want me to do this, because everyone that I interviewed said he was really private. And so there were many years where I'm like, should I not be doing this? Like, does he not want to be known? And there was even one time we were in the graveyard trying to dig up there was a woman who raised him, and one time in the graveyard I saw a homemade tombstone poking out of the grass, and it was for her, and I was trying to like unearth that headstone so it could be revealed. And while I was doing that, I got bit by a fire ant, and I'm allergic to fire ants, and my arm like swelled up really huge, and I became convinced that was a sign from Roy that I was not supposed to be doing this. I was like, we have to cancel this. So there was just a long time where I wasn't sure, and until I got the journals, I still wasn't sure that he would have wanted to be known. But one of the journals had a poem that he wrote, or possibly a song, that it's called "The Town Misfit," and it had a lyric in there that said, "When I'm gone, no one will remember me or miss me." And I remember reading it that night and just feeling like he's wrong. Like, people will... He just seemed to me to want to be known, and I hope I'm right about that. But I have kissed other women since that first one, so I might not make it to heaven to find out if I am wrong, if he didn't want me to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the desire to be known is an interesting way to think about how you show up in community, and like other people will know who I am.
Well, everyone... Okay, so as my grandma said, people in town did think that they loved him, but they loved him in this way where he was not a person. Like, for the first couple years, I'd go try to talk to people about Roy, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I knew Roy real good. He mowed lawns and played the banjo, and he rode a bicycle." And I would be like, "Anything else?" And they'd be like, "He rode a bicycle." And that was every single interview. Like, maybe once in a while, someone would have... There was like a rumor that he sold a song to the Judds, and sometimes there was like, it wasn't the Judds, it was the Whites. But that was otherwise, like, people didn't really know anything about him, and that's not real love. Like, that's not a real person. So I think... And people also told me that he was extremely Christian, and I think he was to a point, but also a lot of his journals are complaining about the church. So I think people just didn't know his true feelings, and I'm not sure if he had anyone who he felt he could call to bring him milk of magnesia.
Do you feel like you know the real Roy?
Oh, no.
No.
I mean, I know some of the things from his journal, but some of them were very surprising to me. Like, there was one very pro-Nixon one. That was surprising to me. I had just had in my mind like we would be the same or something. And then there was another one from the end. It was like he did these year-end reviews every year, and there was one from the 70s where he was complaining that in that year, men looked like women and women looked like men. And he was like, I know I'm one to talk, but I can't help it. And so I was like, oh, he might not have liked me. I mean, it's totally possible he wouldn't have. I have no idea.
Yeah. It's interesting because even in the subtitle, you say, in a way, you take the title from a version of the title of Roy's journal, Diary of a Misfit, but the subtitle is A Memoir and a Mystery, and the mystery seems to be the thing held in the notebooks, in the journals. Like, what's the mystery as you think about it?
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to Anna Griffin, who works at OPB. She came up with that subtitle because my publisher said I had to have a subtitle. And I just texted her, I was like, what should the subtitle of my book be? And she wrote back in like 10 seconds, A Memoir and a Mystery.
And it was that easy to convince
She
you?
has a very fast brain. So just that, I didn't make that up, so I just want to be honest. To me, the mystery is one that I haven't mentioned yet, but so when my grandma first told me about Roy, she told me that these two people, Jewel Ellis and John Ellis, raised Roy. And Roy was very short and very, very white, and Jewel was a Native American. And my grandma said that when Jewel was on her deathbed, she had like put herself in a bathtub full of alcohol because she thought that would break her fever. And she called my great-grandma across the street, and she pulled my great-grandma like down into the bathtub. And my great-grandma's name was Rita Mae. And she said, Rita Mae, Roy is as much a woman as you or I ever was. And then she confessed that she had stolen Roy when he was a little girl in Arkansas and then ran with him to Louisiana. Now, everybody else in Delhi has their own different story. Some people think that Jewel adopted Roy, which I don't think was true because the United States government took Native Americans' children from them. They did not give white children to Native Americans. That's not part of our country's history. Some people think a piece of farm equipment fell on Roy's head, and that's why he lived as a man. My favorite theory is that someone told me very earnestly that the reason Roy lived as a man is when he was young, his mother could not afford starch for dresses. And so he had to live as a man, which that seems, Roy lived till he was 80. That is a long game for starch. I don't think starch was still in fashion by the time he died, and he did live on a very limited income, but at some point somebody could have afforded the starch, I think. I've gotten afield. Oh, the mystery, I guess, was initially to me was the kidnapping mystery, and like that was when I first started this project, I wanted to get on This American Life, and I thought it would be like a kidnapping mystery, and I thought I would like go to a library and find an old article that's like baby stolen and raised as a boy.
So, as a reader, that felt to me like the narrative hook, but the mystery felt like what was driving you to go back there and learn more about Roy, and that the mystery felt to me like it was more something like who am I and where do I fit? That felt to me like I know there was what's the literal story about Roy, but I felt like what was driving you back, I don't know, how does that...
Do you have a Goodreads account?
Say that one more time?
Do you have a Goodreads account?
A Goodreads account?
If so, I just want you to go put that on there because there's a lot of unhappy customers about the mystery part on Goodreads.
I can start one.
Just go tell my haters what the real mystery is.
But there's a serious question I'm trying to ask.
But I have not thought about it that way.
The going back and going, understanding Roy is a way to understand myself.
I hadn't thought of that as a mystery. I meant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. Yeah.
It isn't in it isn't in understanding Roy that I came to understand myself. It's everything that happened around me while I was down there. Roy was my MacGuffin. I thought I was down there doing that. And meanwhile, I'm like hanging out with my mom and her sisters in their nightgowns in the carport, or talking to my crazy smart cousin who just got out of prison, who was willing to go back for me to steal these journals. And I didn't learn anything about Roy in particular that taught me something about myself. I don't think, other than I'm extremely lucky to have a different life. But I think, just being there and coming, and some of it just took me a long time to even understand, like far after I had experienced it. Because we taped it all, I have myself on videotape and all the interviews, and sometimes I go back. I started when I was in my early 20s, and then I just turned 40, so it was a long time. And sometimes I go back and look at myself in my 20s, and I'm like, what is motivating that person? Or like, what is she thinking? Why is she acting like that? And so I'm just coming to understand myself that way, from all the in-between stuff that I thought wasn't a part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you, as a last question, before we open questions from this microphone over here, can I give you the last word? Since you already spoiled the end in some way, I want to give you and the room the last words, and ask how they land, your last words in the book, and ask how they land with you now. I had hoped reading Roy's diaries would settle something inside me. If I could solve his mysteries, I thought I would decipher my own. I would know where I belonged. But I understand now that most of what haunted me before might haunt me forever. I drove away from Louisiana, but I returned. I am still returning, even now. How do those...
Are you just telling me that's great writing? Or,
I'll put it in Goodreads. I guess I'm curious how it lands with you now, those words now. I have a follow-up question, but that's what I want to start.
I think that's still how I feel. Writing a book is weird and interesting because it's very different from a newspaper. I felt it very clearly when I got there. Like I really, when I'm reading, I really like a really good first sentence and a really good last sentence. And it took me a long time to come up with the first sentence. I had many drafts. But that last one I just sat down and wrote because it was exactly what I felt. And I still am. Like if I ever can persuade like I said, I travel a lot for work, and if there's ever a reason for me to do the story in Louisiana or Mississippi, I always take it. And I'm still, I guess it's almost like a sore tooth or something that I'm returning to in a way. Like I'm always just like touching that nerve of going back, or like wanting to re-experience those things. And it still feels unsettled to me, but I think I'm okay with it being unsettled now. When I was young, the thing you were talking about, like I thought if I could solve Roy's mysteries, I would solve my own. I thought that when I was like 18, 19, 20, that if I could just find this place where everybody loved Roy, then I would be happy. And if I knew like how he came to be, I would know how I came to be. But that didn't remain true for me over the course of reporting it.
And there's that short sentence buried in there, I would I would know where I belonged. And just want to say that, like, it feels conditional. I mean, the would.
Would is a conditional verb.
And which feels like, but belonging also feels like the thing you're still walking away in some way thinking about.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm so much more comfortable with it not being one place now. I was actually talking to someone earlier about moving because my job is in D.C. And for so much of my adult life, I thought, I have to get out of Portland. Like I actually had multiple breakups because I was like, I'm not staying here. And then I just kept staying here. And I really wanted to live in New York, which I did. And then I wound up coming back here, not because I initially really wanted to come back here. But now I just feel like a real peace about it. I don't really have any like wanderlust or angst, and a lot of that longing was to go back to Louisiana. Like there's a part in the book too where I like apply for a job at the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, and then I got offered it, and I was like, I can't take this because you don't recycle. I actually told the people that, and I was like, and at the time I was like, and I can't get legally married, and the guy was like, well, we don't. Everyone in the newsroom likes gay people. But I just felt all the time, like even right before I moved to Portland, like I was getting a divorce and I could either come back here or I thought about going to Louisiana, and I got scared because the pandemic was still going. I didn't know what they'd be popping off with down there. So I came here just to stay alive. But I'm so glad I did, and I just don't feel that, I don't know, I just don't feel like I'm wandering around anymore. Like I know Louisiana will be there, Mississippi will be there, and if I want to go there, I can book a horrible flight on American and get down there, and I'm good being here. Like I can drive this whole city without a map, and like the person who owns my favorite bookstore is here, and I'm just like, you're the bookstore and you're here on the front row, and like I don't know, it just, yeah, I just have, I don't know, I'm comfortable with it not being one place or feeling like there's lots of ways I belong or people to whom I belong who are all over this world, or like neighborhoods that will always be mine in some way, even if I'm not there.
So maybe we'll transition from this moment.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't coherent
You're
about
totally
that.
coherent, and I would just say that I think it sounded like you were saying, for now, you're good to be in Portland. I have the sense that Portland is very good with you here. And I want to say thank you. Maybe we can all say thank you.
Yeah, you can open up. I think I'll stay here forever, though. I mean, not just for now. Like, I feel, or if I were to go, I would still want to come back.
Yeah, I want to invite questions from that microphone over there, and there can be a moment of mustering up the courage to head up there that can be hard. We've been pretty committed to people asking the questions as the people who have the questions, not just on a piece of paper. So I would just invite you to, head up there if you have a question. If you're in La Grande or somewhere else and you want to send in a question, we'll try to get them up to my colleague, Roselle Medina. And I will say, a week from today, on the 18th, Roselle is going to be facilitating a follow-up conversation based on the ideas in a couple of different articles you've written and what talked about tonight. And so if you're interested either in the room or online, you could find the link easily to sign up for that and have that conversation. I don't see people sprinting to the microphone, but I'm hoping for a courageous first person who will start, and yeah, please introduce yourself and jump in. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I don't know that I have like a fully formed question yet, but I'm thinking back to when you were talking about Lake Washington. I grew up in Seattle. I've been in Portland for about 10 years. I've been in Oregon for like 15 years. And I grew up near Lake Washington, so I'm very familiar with like a sunrise over the water. And I'm curious, I kind of think sometimes that when something is familiar to us, we sort of lose the like beauty of it, or we like lose the sparkle of it. And I am curious if there are places in Mississippi or where you're from where like, because it feels so familiar, it doesn't feel magical. And then I think about I've never been to the South, and so to me that feels like a place that feels so unfamiliar and like magical in this special way. And I'm curious if there are places for you like that there, or like if you consider, the ways in which the Northwest is a beautiful place, but in the opposite, if that's familiar, then something that's not. So it's not really a coherent question, but I just am sort of thinking about like the opposite of those two things.
Yeah, thank you so much for being brave enough to come ask the first question. I would never. That is a beautiful, similar question. When I first moved out here, I felt so sure that the place I came from was ugly. Once I saw this place, I did not know that leaves could like slowly change colors. Like in Louisiana, they just all turn brown one day and die. So I had never seen an orange leaf before. And I continue to think point in Portland's favor on that one, but I had never seen mountains. I remember I kept thinking they look like holograms. I actually lived in Bellingham before I lived in Portland, so I would see like in the like Skagit Valley all the mountains, and they just look like holograms to me. I do not go home and think, wow, what a beautiful landscape. I guess the pine trees are comforting, but I don't have that like everybody should see this feeling. I don't know, maybe like about a big oak with all the good climbing branches. It's more, I think, the people that I came to, like, that I had taken for granted, like the people saying hi to you in the street, or like one of the last times I was down there, it was raining and I was coming out of a grocery store, and a man ran over to my car door and held an umbrella up over my car door for me to get in, like a complete stranger. Like, I think I took that kind of thing for granted as a kid. Also, the food. I know Southern food isn't really slept on, but I didn't really know, like, how good, just like how really good catfish is. Like, it is so good. And like, I just took that for granted. I was eating catfish all the time with no care in the world about how special it is, even though it's a bottom feeder. Now, I'd never take a catfish for granted. I enjoy it every time. So it's a little bit different version of that. We don't have Lake Washington. We mostly just have man-made reservoirs down there, or swamps. I don't see the ditch. We used to crawfish for ditches outside of our house with a piece of bologna, and I don't really see those and think, I want to see the sunrise over this ditch, but I do miss crawfish.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor, and throughout the book you reference your video footage all the time. So what are you going to do with all your video footage? And can you answer that question at least partially in your best Southern voice?
What is my Southern voice?
That's what I want to hear. You talk about reverting back to...
Oh, well,
your
it's hard to
accent.
fully revert now because my mom is dead and I don't drink, and those would be my two main things that would bring it out in me. Sometimes I do bring it out if I'm talking to like a really powerful man and I want him to think I'm stupid. I haven't used it on you.
I don't have that kind of power.
Okay, so what are we going to do with the video footage? I would love to get it out there. It's so, my writing capabilities are just limited. Like, there's just some ways that I just can't capture the way people talk. I can't even do it myself now. And they're just beautiful. All the people are so beautiful, I think. Like, I love their voices. I love the way their homes are decorated. There was one woman who had just so many different kinds of cowboy boots, like porcelain cowboy boots, line drawings of cowboy boots, stuffed cowboy boots. There was one woman who kept talking to her dog the whole time we were doing the interview, and she would just turn to it and be like, "Mama gonna cry?" That kind of stuff, it didn't work in a book. Like, you can't just write mama gon' cry in the book and feel it. You just don't. And I think I like kept trying to describe people as having Blanche Devereaux voices because that was like the closest I could get, but that's not even right. So I do hope it gets out, but it does take a lot of money to make a movie, and it just, I don't know, it was hard, and I just didn't have like the video making skills. Even though I have my capabilities as a writer are limited, I am better at that than video, and so I think I needed other people to help. But we have talked to some people out in Hollywood, so we'll see. Hopefully something will come of it. But I do post footage from it on my Instagram sometimes. So if you, it's in the back of the book what my name on Instagram is, and if you follow it, you can see some of it. And I do think it is really worth seeing or hearing some of them talk because they are just way more vivid than any sentence I can write.
Well, I hope you can make it come to
I
life
really do
for
too.
all of us at some point. But thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris. My pronouns are she, her. I just wanted to say that so much of what you said about belonging really resonated with me, coming from a really rural town and growing up knowing that you were gay, that everyone hated you. And when you first leave to go somewhere else, you don't feel that grief of leaving that life behind and that town behind. But then going back decades later and seeing the community that you had or the lives that they had does bring some sort of grief. So was there some form and sense of belonging that you had in your own personal journey and going back home where you cultivated empathy and forgiveness for the community that you came from?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question. Like, do I have empathy for the people that I came from? Yeah, I would say one of the most exciting things to me about writing the book is getting to know and appreciate the intelligence and creativity of people down there. Like, one of probably the most striking examples for me is I had been trying to learn so much about welfare, like reading very serious texts and like famous articles about welfare. And I went down to talk to this cousin who had been in prison and who she had struggled with drug addiction. She'd had her first kid when she was 14. And like on paper, I am technically more successful than her, which people would read to me being more intelligent than her. And she just rattled off like how the entire system worked, and she was like telling me what the ombudsman number was, and she just like had a full understanding of social services in a way that I didn't. And I was like, I've been reading forever, and I just have like, I'm not nearly as smart as her. And I think a lot of it just gave me an appreciation for like all the little breaks I had in life to get where I am. One of which, honestly, was just probably being gay, that I didn't get pregnant. And I think, yeah, especially later when I could go back, I could like really fully appreciate the way people told stories, or I don't know, yeah, no amount of school going in the world can teach you how to tell a story the way some of those people just naturally can, or it's been handed down to them. So I definitely have like a deep, deep love for all the people in the book, and then also just people I encounter down there all the time. And you were talking about the grief too. It's interesting. I think one of the ways that most came out to me years later was going back and like seeing like foods at the grocery store that we don't have here, and just like a long yearning for Bluebell ice cream or a certain brand of cornbread, and like that kind of stuff was easier for me to grieve first before I could grieve like the big things of losing that place.
Thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability and being in community this evening.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a fellow Louisiana native. Everyone I'm related to lives in Mississippi. And I'm similarly sort of celebrate that I made it out. You spend a lot of time in what I would describe as a queer person, hostile territory. If there's this drive for us who can to get out, have you given any thought to what it would take to actually make change, not just in the South, but communities that are increasingly hostile to queer people? As you go around, and what would it take if the gold standard is to leave and go somewhere where you're accepted, which I love it here for that reason. But if I had stayed, maybe there would have been a chance for me to change a mind or two. But then at some point I just decided that's not what I want my life to be about.
Yeah.
So surely you've had thoughts about this.
Yeah, actually my favorite, or one of my favorite chapters in the book is in Mississippi, the day that they passed this law I mentioned, and I was talking to these two lesbians, and I was like, why don't you leave? Like in Portland, this was pre-current regime, I was like, our governor is bisexual and the Speaker of the House is a lesbian, and like, it's not like this. You could have a whole better life. And one of the lesbians was like, F that. Like, winter only lasts 6 weeks here. And she said something to me that I think about all the time. She said, I get to have my state and they have to take me. And I was just so jealous of her bravery then, of like, how did she have that stuff to just be like, no, Mississippi, you are stuck with me and you are not running me out. I don't care. And I talk to families like this all the time in my job, particularly the Texans. Like they are really crazy down there. Like they do not care what Governor Abbott does to them. Like so many of them are like committed to staying. Which is obviously very difficult because Texas is a place now where if you have a transgender child, like CPS might take that child away from you. And so a lot of those parents have just gone underground, but want to stay there. But if you're underground, then it's hard to make that change. But like they have a very real fear of having their children taken away. So what do you do with that? Yes, I think the last 20 years shows that like that kind of familiarity changes things. Like I said, it was 87% of Mississippians who voted against same-sex marriage in 2004. The last Pew survey said 71% of Americans approve of same-sex marriage. That's an astronomical change in 19 years. And I imagine that the same thing will happen for trans rights. 19 years is a long time to live through, though, when you're a kid or not a kid. I mean, it's increasingly, they're going after trans adults in Florida and Missouri and places like that. So there will always be people, I think, who have that gumption and that verve or nerve or whatever it is to stay and do that. And I think we owe those people a lot, and we should, I don't know, send them some food down there or something.
Well, they should send us Bluebell ice
Yeah,
cream.
not that they want our food. We should just send them gift cards for buying their own food. I think also, like, you have to have different people run for office to make policies that align with what you want. Now, of course, that's very difficult because states like Ohio and Wisconsin are heavily gerrymandered to ensure that you don't get to run for office and win. So I suppose that you could vote as Wisconsin did, for a new judge, but then the Republican supermajority might try to oust that judge. So it is, it's very thorny and tricky once you get in there and start trying to untie things. But for the people who can live their lives that way, I think it's so important, because there will always be gay and trans people who are coming up in those places who need someone to be there for them and like show them the way. And if we all leave, that won't happen.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Hi, Casey. Longtime Portlander from Choctaw, Oklahoma, who can relate to a lot of the things you said, especially about food and culture and things like that. So I wanted to sort of amend a question that we got from Grand. LeGrand, where people are watching, have you found any good Southern food here in Portland that you would vouch for? That would be my first part. And then somebody actually asked about humor and pointed towards your use of humor as a gesture towards belonging, and also wondering, in addition to humor, how else you invite belonging. And then after, I'll step back, and then I want to ask a question about the piece that we're going to discuss next week as well. So.
Okay. I live 1 block from Screen Door, and I wear the hell out of it. Because they have catfish.
Yes.
Otherwise, I have not had a lot of good Southern food here.
Have you tried Miss Delta?
Can we go to humor?
I have my own particular desires, and they're based off what my grandma makes. Like, y'all lining up at Pine State Biscuits, that's not my grandma's biscuit. Like, I just can't accept that biscuit into my heart. It's so wrong to me. Actually, the best Southern restaurant, and I actually did cry at this restaurant, was Muscadine on 15th and Prescott. First of all, she served field peas for breakfast, which I love. And then also, she made a biscuit that tasted just like my grandma's, except it was professional. And the first time I had that biscuit, I truly did cry at the counter, because my grandma was dead by that point, and I thought I would never taste that thing again. And it was just like perfect in a way I can't do, because this woman actually was a chef. And she also had a good catfish that she served for breakfast. And then she closed down, and I have not forgiven her. This isn't related to my story, but I just want to say this publicly. I also don't forgive Ping for closing down like 12 years ago. The humor question. What was the question about it?
So someone in LeGrand said, I'm struck by your humor as a gesture towards belonging. How else do you invite belonging into your life?
Interesting. Okay, so I don't really think of humor as a way of belonging for me. I think of it as a defense mechanism to keep me, like my real me, like privately protected, and so I don't cry up here. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but it probably does limit my vulnerability, which is never the answer to, limiting your vulnerability is never the answer to belonging somewhere, probably, but I guess maybe it would want to make people to talk to you. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer. I'm sorry to the person in LeGrand.
Well, that's I'm sure they'll get to sleep eventually tonight. The other thing is, in a week we'll be convening to talk about the piece which I love about the devoutly Christian transgender teen. Again, as an Oklahoman, that one spoke to me in a lot of ways. So I'm just curious if you can share any sort of top of the head thoughts about what it was like to write that piece for people who might be interested in that piece.
Yeah, so he's asking about a story I did in Iowa about this trans teenager who also got kicked out of his church, but unlike me, did not give up on Christianity, because he basically was like, his pastor kicked him out, and he was just like, I don't think so. You're wrong about Jesus. And this kid is very cool, and I wish I had been him when I was 18. And he does this letter writing service to other like young queer Christians who like need a word of advice. And he like has all the Bible verses and stories to prove that like Jesus would have actually been the first in line to accept gay and trans people. And yeah, I just thought I really admired that kid and wish I had had that self-worth or whatever he has to be like, no, I'm not letting one errant pastor define how I feel about myself, and I am not going to let other people's pastors define how they feel about themselves, and I'm like going to hold on to this. It also made me, I watched like some church services with them, and there was like things that were familiar about it, and I do think it made me still miss that feeling. Like if you aren't a Christian going to church, there's not really a good replacement for that feeling of spending maybe like recovery meetings are like that. That's probably the closest that I've experienced, but where you're just going the same time every week and you're going to see the same people and there's like a format to it and you're there to like be emotional and confess. I guess recovery places is the only other place, but that it's very similar. You're like confessing all your stuff and you're crying together. And yeah, and you're studying some book, and I guess I do, yeah. I like that format, and yeah, I guess I missed that when I was reporting that story, but mostly I felt so proud and envious of this kid that he made his own relationship with God and his own study of the Bible, and like he had a more sophisticated understanding of the Bible than I did when I was 18. Like I just thought every single word was from God when I was a teenager, and even the ones that contradicted themselves were still probably like directly from God. And there's lots of things that I grew up believing about the Bible that are not even in the Bible. Like my understanding of Revelation, I think, came from a Hallmark movie or something, not the actual book.
So here's what I want to do. I want to have us close the formal program with first, I guess, two things. First, what you just said about format made me think there's lots of opportunities for groups of people around the state to be talking about questions like the kind of questions that Casey's been helping us think about tonight, including more in this series. And actually, on November 6th in Grants Pass, we'll have the second in this series, and it's going to be on aging and belonging. And that'll be streamed as well, and a few others in that series, which I hope you'll check out. We're also doing a lot of conversations around the state on housing and belonging. We've got a team of facilitators leading community conversations about that any community organization can bring in. So I hope you'll look into possibilities to keep engaging with each other in conversation. What you just said about the letter writing that the young person that you wrote about is doing. We've got a program here in Oregon called Dear Stranger, where we send out a prompt and we try to exchange letters from different zip codes so that you're writing to each other on something like shelter, home, the kind of questions we're talking about tonight as well. So just want to say, I hope you'll look into opportunities with Oregon Humanities. I want to say a big thanks to Chelsea and Lavender for helping us tonight. I also want to thank the Alberta Rose Theater, which has been a home to this series for many years now, and it's just a really good spot to keep coming back to. So I want to say thanks to Alberta Rose, and I want to say thanks to my colleagues at Oregon Humanities who do a lot to make this happen. Thanks again for coming out. Casey will be up front with some books. I hope you will talk to each other, maybe even think about those initial questions about belonging. Instances where it happened, things that make it hard. Maybe talk to someone you don't know about that. Can we say a big thanks to Casey Parks? Well, thank you.
much.